Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Computer Forensics and Electronic Discovery. Computer Forensics and Electronic Discovery, otherwise referred to as eDiscovery, can provide the evidence needed for today's cases and investigations. Electronically stored information dominates our lives. From home to work and everywhere in between, we are constantly interacting with computers and electronic devices. Our conversations are recorded in emails and text messages. Our location can be recorded in smartphones, and even our driving habits may be recorded in black boxes in our vehicles. This program provides a non-technical examination of where to look for electronic information that is vital to your cases. For example, you will learn what hidden data may be stored with electronic documents that may validate or invalidate their contents. You will see how highly accurate tracking information can be automatically recorded by a smartphone and published to the internet for all to see. You will discover how deleted files and emails can often be recovered by a computer forensics technician. Half or more of the evidence relative to your cases may be stored electronically. To maintain an edge, you must be actively seeking out this information. Remember, even if you're not looking for the electronic information, your opponents probably are. Topics that will be discussed during today's program include electronically stored information, ESI, deleted and leftover data, examples of Common ESI, defining discovery objectives, and using ESI in your cases. The presenter for today's program is Jeffrey Sassinsky. Jeffrey has experience in many high-technology areas ranging from email messaging to data storage to data recovery. A graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and an engineer, Jeffrey is the founder and the principal of Sassinsky Data Services, LLC, a full-service data recovery and computer forensics firm. Jeffrey has also worked with some of the world's largest firms during his career. He has acted as a technical and business leader, a project manager, and a corporate trainer in highly visible and demanding projects. Jeffrey has the ability to explain highly technical subjects to those with little or no technical background and can help you identify, retrieve, and present the electronic information related to your cases. During this presentation, we will take two question and answer breaks. If you have a question, we ask that you use the chat feature or Q&A feature found on the right-hand side of the screen to submit your questions to the presenter. We encourage all attendees to submit questions throughout the presentation. Tomorrow morning, I'll send out an email with a link to the archived recording of the webinar, and we do ask that you take time to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen after the webinar is over. I'm now going to turn our program over to our distinguished presenter, Jeffrey Sassinsky. Jeffrey, the program is now all yours.
Well, thank you, Matt. I certainly appreciate the introduction, and welcome to everyone joining us today. Good afternoon and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. I think today's presentation, I certainly hope that you get information out of it that's useful to your cases and to your firm. It's something that is pervasive in our industry nowadays. Electronic information certainly is not going away, and it's only growing exponentially by the day. The types of information that you can find for your cases will often lead you to the smoking gun, for lack of a better term. It's also, by looking for the electronic information in cases, it's also something that can help you in many ways reduce the costs of your cases by eliminating dead ends or showing you which direction to look for the evidence that is important to winning and having good outcomes for the cases that you currently have. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll get started. And as Matt said, if you have any questions, you can chat those to Matt using the box in the bottom right corner, and I'll try to get to all the questions that we can during the presentation. But I'm also available to you anytime. You can reach me through the information on the screen here, or you can also reach me through TASA, of course. They can help you put you in touch with me as well too. So let's get started by just discussing a little bit about what is electronically stored information. Big word for a very simple concept, but oddly enough, there aren't too many fixed definitions of what ESI really entails. The FRCP does not provide a specific definition of it. It only provides a general definition, but essentially it speaks of information that's created, manipulated, stored, or best utilized in digital form, as opposed to hard copy type information. And as we discussed, this information, because of the ease of creating the information and also the automatic procedures that create this information, as well as the pervasiveness of it and its ability to be replicated so simply, ESI just grows exponentially daily. And it varies over all courses of our lives, from our personal lives to our business lives. The information can be formal documents in the form of Word documents, or it can be informal communications in emails and text messages. And of course, the information can be created by the user itself, or it can be created automatically by computers. So you say, what is user-generated information versus computer-generated information? Well, user-generated is obviously what you think. If someone sits down at a computer, they type out an email, that's user-created information that's then stored and transmitted electronically. It can also be quasi-user-created in that a person takes a photograph while the user is operating the device to take the photograph. And of course, the camera is storing that information electronically through the digital means. Once we create the user-created information, then that information may be manipulated by the computer to provide, say, additional views or summaries or calculations, whatever it may be. So you create an Excel document, and then in that Excel document you input user-inputted information. So you put in financial records, you put in statement information, and then the Excel document has formulas to create other views or graphs or whatever it may be. And that information is quasi-computer-generated information. But computer-generated information can go on to information that's created entirely by a computer, entirely by a computer process. And in often cases, this may be automatically created or created on command. Examples of that would be workstation logs. Computer servers will keep logs of the information that's traveling through those servers. Oftentimes, those logs are meant to be used when troubleshooting or fixing issues. Metadata, which we'll discuss here shortly, is information that the computer creates about other information. Data about data is metadata. Black boxes, GPS track logs, phone call histories. All of these are examples of computers creating and generating information that is then stored and can be recalled by computer forensic technicians and used in your cases. So I mentioned metadata there, and some of you may know the term, others may not. It's becoming more popular, though, because you have to understand what metadata is so that you can, A, find it and B, control it. For example, metadata may be found in Microsoft Word, and we'll take Microsoft Word as an example. You create a Microsoft Word document, and Microsoft Word will automatically store information in the background and attach it to that document that's related to the information in that Word document. And you may not even know that that information exists in there. And we'll look at an example of specifically what type of information you can find. Or you send an email. The email itself, the subject of it and the body of it is user-created. But when you send that email, every time that email goes through a different server, the server will store information about that email. Maybe information about the route that email takes through the internet to another server and then ultimately to the destination. Or the time with which the time from which the email was sent to when it was received. The computer that was used to create that email. All this is metadata that may be stored with that email. Or the same thing with digital cameras. Many digital cameras nowadays have a GPS chip inside the camera that knows the camera's position, and when you take a picture, it saves the exact position of where that picture was taken and attaches it to the photograph itself. So this metadata can help validate or invalidate the authenticity of the user-created data. So someone says, well, I sent that email at 3 o'clock in the morning long before I ever knew that anything was going to happen with a court case against me. You can say, well, that's not what we find when we look at the email. We can tell that this email hit a server down the road at actually 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that doesn't coincide with the story that you're telling me. There might be more that you need to dig there. So it can be used to try to figure out, is this true, and is the information in there exactly what the person is saying it is. It can also be used to figure out if the information that was user-created was maybe modified, or if it was maybe created from two different sources that were put together to make it look like something that it's not. We can look at that computer-generated metadata that a computer forensic technician can extract and say, this does or does not coincide with the information we're seeing or the information that was given to us. So here's a brief example of metadata. We took a Word document here, standard Word document, and we used a meta viewer on that Word document. And this is a real example of the metadata that you would see coming off of a Word document. You can see that this information may not be something that the writer of the document intended to be transmitted with the document. But because they didn't know that this metadata is automatically stored with the document, they are inadvertently transmitting with the document additional information that can be used for or against them. For example, obviously in the metadata here we see the file name and we see the title of the document, but we can also see the author information in the document. We can see the version of Microsoft Word that was used to create the document. We can see things like creation dates, last printed dates, last saved dates, how many minutes of the document was edited, and we can see the last saved by information and statistics about the document itself. So, and additionally, if you look on the document itself, there are highlights and comments and editing tracking information that can be stored with the document. This is not only important to us from a computer forensic standpoint of obviously, let's say someone creates a Word document and say, well, this is, we'll take the example of a contested will. This was the last will and testament of my client, but then when we go and we look at the metadata, we find that that document was actually created or edited after the person had already passed away. So this is obvious information and the uses of it is obvious, but you also have to think about what metadata is included in the documents that you're sending out from your firm. So are you sending documents to the opposition in the form of Word documents or PDFs? And what metadata may the opposition be looking at with your documents? There are publicly available, and in many cases free, what they call meta scrubbers that you can use on your documents to eliminate any of this unwanted extra information being transmitted with the documents that you're sending out. Some questions about computer forensics versus eDiscovery as well, too. There's varying definitions as far as what is computer forensics, what is eDiscovery, is it the same thing, is it not? These are just more anecdotal type definitions. But basically, computer forensics is the realm of the capture and expert analysis of electronic information. So you go out and you hire a computer forensics technician to go in to track down that information and capture and analyze that information. Whereas eDiscovery is really more the use of electronic assistance to call, review, and or export the electronic information that you find. So you might use an eDiscovery program to go in and look through the information that you found, that the computer forensic technician found. And obviously there's some overlap between the two. There's also a new area called litigation readiness, which is kind of an offshoot of eDiscovery. What it is that corporations found that it's actually more cost-effective for them to be ready for litigation and the discovery process by cataloging their information that they have in their systems prior to actually having a lawsuit. This is often taken into account in large firms, such as maybe Coca-Cola has a litigation readiness department because there's someone that may be open to lawsuits because of the size of their firm. And so they found that, look, rather than each time we have a case against us having to go through this whole process again, it's better to be prepared for it. The computer forensic process, being that forensic is right in the name of the process, it is a forensic science. There are certain steps that are typically taken to ensure that the information that is found has the best chance of being usable in a court of law. For example, the forensic technician will want to maintain a chain of custody of devices and thereby the data contained in. And that would be once the device is handed over to the computer forensic technician, they will then document the transfer of custody of that device. They also want to create a duplicate of the data on that device without modifying the original, and this is often done through the use of hardware and software write blocking products, which assures that no information is written back to the device itself. And then they create what's called a digital, or we call it a digital fingerprint. It's known as a hash of the original and the duplicate. This is a mathematical formula that looks at the data of the original and looks at the data of the duplicate, and it creates this long string of characters that represent that information. If you change one tiny little piece of information, the long string of characters will change. The hash will change. And so that, by comparing the two hashes, you can prove that the original and the duplicate are exact. And then that way you can say that no, there is no modification of the data from the original device. And then obviously they want to provide a record or a log of the actions that they took on the information and in extracting that information in the computer forensic process. So we talked a little bit about what electronic information actually is, but let's talk about how we get it and what it can do for you. We're going to go into later some very specific examples of the places to look for computer information and electronic information. But right now, let's look at how the computer stores information and why we can find, delete it, and leftover data. To think about why we can find, delete it, and leftover data on our computers, we have to think a little bit about how computers actually store files. And the best example that I've come up with as to how this actually works is to think of a book. You have a book, and in that book you have the pages that store the actual text in the book, and you have a table of contents, and the table of contents points to the text in that book. The computer does the exact same thing. So the computer stores the data on a hard drive or on a storage device, and that's where the data actually sits. But when it looks for that data, when you ask it to recall a file, it also stores a table of contents for those files. So it goes and it finds the table of contents, and that table of contents refers to the physical position on the hard drive or the storage device where that information may be stored. Look up the table of contents, go and find the information. But this is where it gets interesting. How do computers delete files? Well, computers are built for speed. They're not necessarily built for security in most cases. And so when a computer is asked to delete a file, it doesn't necessarily go through and delete the data. What it does is it deletes or marks for deletion the index pointing to that data. So going back to the table of contents example, instead of going through and you want to remove a portion of that book, you don't go through, or the computer doesn't go through and tear those pages of the book out of the book. What it does is it crosses out the entry in the table of contents saying that that's where the information is. The data itself is still contained on the storage media. So even though the table of contents entry is gone, the data, the pages, if you will, is still on that storage media. And that data can remain there for days, months, even years after it's been marked for deletion. The computer says, okay, those areas where that data is stored is available for use if you need it, but if the hard drive is large enough or there's enough free space, it may never come over and overwrite the information of those areas where that data is stored. So as computer forensic technicians, what we do is we can go in and we can ignore the table of contents, if you will, and just flip through the pages of the book. They look at the data itself and see what's there. Even if the table of contents entry is marked as deleted, we go in and we find the file itself. Now, there are operating systems and there are programs that offer secure deletion. And what they do is they not only erase the table of contents entry, but they go and they overwrite the specific areas where the data lies on that storage device. But that is typically not the default choice. And in many cases, it can use, the user would have to specifically select to secure overwrite the information, or they would have to install and use a special program to secure overwrite the information. In most cases, if you're just doing a standard deletion, the data will still be there for at least a period of time, sometimes a long period of time, after it's been marked for deletion. The same is true for formatted disks and hard drives. Formatting a hard drive or a device does not necessarily remove the previously stored data. Many times people say, oh, I formatted my hard drive. Everything must be gone, right? Certainly not the case. What formatting does is it doesn't overwrite the data, it just overwrites the table of contents essentially to a brand new table of contents. So it tears up table of contents entries and puts in blank sheets where those table of contents are, but the pages still exist. And so until the information is specifically overwritten, the data can be recovered by a forensic technician. And this happens time and time again. Once again, there are secure wipes that can be used to eliminate all traces of previous data, but these are typically not the default ways that things are formatted, and in addition, it may require the user to install or use a new program to actually secure wipe the drive. This is important to us not only from the standpoint of electronic information, finding it with the cases, but it's also important to us from the standpoint of what information are you as attorneys and legal professionals allowing to, or potentially allowing to get out into the public by disposing of your equipment. What have you disposed of? And this is not only computers, but also modern copy machines that have hard drives in them that in many cases are storing images of the copies that are made on the copy machine, flashcards and memory sticks, mobile phones, PDAs. I'm sitting right here at my in my conference room, and sitting next to me is my 32 gigabyte iPhone and my 64 gigabyte iPad. The amount of information stored on these two devices can be tremendous. And if I dispose of these devices without specifically secure wiping them or ensuring that my data is securely wiped, or let's say I give them to a family member, I may be giving away information that I don't necessarily want to get out into the public. And you see here on the screen some email messages, some photographs, and these email messages and photographs here are actually taken from a device, a hard drive that was purchased on eBay. So this device was purchased on eBay, and we found that there's additional information that was still in that device. The device was never wiped, and that's just open on eBay for anybody to purchase and then go and do a recovery on that as well too. There's some simple programs. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about cache and page files. How a computer speeds operation is that it will store copies of data for later use in these page files or cache files. Rather than having to load it from the original place each time, or load something over the internet, or load something over a slow network, it will store local copies. This data can remain in these page files or these cache files even after the original file is deleted. So let's say you have a big file that you're reading. Little portions of those files may get stored in this page file or these hash files. Even if you delete the original, the data may still remain, the little portions of this data may still remain, and we can go through and find the information that is in these page files or cache files. Even if the original file is secure deleted, you may get lucky, and that portions of that file or the whole file itself may still exist in the page file or cache file because the computer copied it over. As I said, in many cases, computers weren't necessarily made for security. They were made more for speed, and some of the processes that they use inside that computer helps with speed, but doesn't necessarily help with the security aspect of the computer itself. I'm going to open up the floor now to any questions that we may have, and Matt, you can join me. I know we've gone through a lot of information thus far, and we're going to get into some of the specific areas to look for electronic information. But are there any questions to start out here, Matt, from the what we've gone through?
Yes, we do. We do have we have a couple questions actually for you, Jeff. Celeste asks, is it true that if you save a Microsoft Word document under a new file name, after you're done editing or commenting within the document, that the edit changes and highlights and comments metadata are no longer available for someone to see?
I'm going to give that a big old maybe. And I know that's not necessarily the best answer, but it really depends. And it depends on how you save it. Yes and no. In many cases, it's very easy for that information and that metadata to be transferred over with the save as command. So, for example, if you go through and you cross out some information, you create comments in that file, and then you turn off tracking, and then you make a copy of that, the program can copy that tracking information over as well too. So really the best way to cleanse your files of metadata is to use a reputable and proven metadata scrubber that can be found online. I don't necessarily give any examples of such or recommendations publicly here, but there are many that you can find if you just Google metadata scrubbers or Word metadata scrubber, and that can help you eliminate that information and be more assured that what you're sending over isn't something that you didn't intend.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. We have a question here from Francisco who asks, and I guess it deals with deleting a partition on the hard drive. Does that ensure that the data on the partition is completely wiped? Is there software that you can recommend or that you use that helps retrieve data that has been wiped from a computer?
No, it definitely does not ensure that the data is being wiped. All it does is remove that table of contents entry that we talked about. So just deleting a partition or formatting a drive even will not wipe the information off the drive. And I think the example that we gave there, the drive off of eBay, is a perfect example. That drive was formatted, and so if someone, a novice, just plugged that drive into their computer, they would think that drive was empty. But by using data recovery software that is available over the internet or in stores, Norton makes some, there's many versions of data recovery software, you can go in and extract that information as you saw there in the example off of the drive itself. So even though the drive would look like to the novice that there are no partitions, the information is still very much on the drive. I believe Norton makes some scrubbing software if you're looking to wipe drives, and what you want to look at is secure format or data wiping programs. And once again, a nice Google search will bring up a ton of those for you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I do not see any other questions in the queue, so why don't we continue on with the presentation of content?
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. We'll go on to examples of Common ESI, and this is where we're going to get into actually finding the gems in the data. This is what will be the nitty-gritty of the information in your cases. The first one that we look at is the obvious one, and that's email communication. This is probably the most ubiquitous type of ESI today, and I think everyone out there that's listening to me today can think of one case in particular, or maybe in your case multiple cases, where an email contained incredibly useful information, and I kind of call it here the smoking gun, if you will. I'm often, and this is as a personal note, I'm often shocked at what people will write in emails. They often treat emails as a very personal or informal type of communication between themselves and whomever they're speaking with. It's a surprise because they'll often put something in an email that they wouldn't think about sitting down, typing out at a typewriter or printing out on a printer, putting in an envelope and stamping and sending to someone. But emails are much easier to copy and duplicate and store than paper documents. So it should actually be the opposite. You would think that you would have more informal communication on paper and less electronically, but that's not the case. I don't know if it's because of the ease of sending emails or whatever it may be, and I won't get into the psychological aspects of it. But people often talk very frankly in emails, and by finding these emails where people are talking about information that is important to your cases, you can often find at least the route down which you want to pursue additional information about the case. Emails also are very, very easy to duplicate or to transmit. If you send an email to somebody, not only does that email leave your computer and enter their computer, it also travels through servers in the middle, and then you have no control over whether that person saves that email, or they store that email, or it's backed up, or they forward that email to 10,000 other people. It can be done with a simple click of a button, whether they intend to do it or it's done unintentionally. And often that can lead to cases where folks like myself and other computer forensic technicians can find these emails that are so important to your cases. There are multiple types of email systems, starting with corporate email systems. Corporate email systems are what you would find in, obviously, businesses and larger corporations. They're either hosted directly by the corporation themselves or hosted by a third-party provider. Case law has shown, and I am not an attorney, I will say that here, so this is for you guys to go out and look at, but in my experience, case law has shown that there is no expectation of privacy on the part of an employee when working at a company-owned computer. So the company has the right to look at what information is being used or what information is stored on the computers that they own. The emails in corporate email systems are often accessible through an email client or a portable device or through remote web access, and they are often stored on the server, whether that server is hosted by, as I said, a third-party company that the corporation hires to host the email, or locally in, say, the corporation's own IT department or server department. So you can go in, you can access these emails through their servers. They can also be, and you think about how pervasive the information may be and how easy it is to duplicate that information. If someone's reading the information locally on their home computer or on their BlackBerry or their iPhone or whatever it may be, copies of those emails may be stored in those locations as well, too. Moving on from the corporate system, we look at the Internet service provider. Now, the business or individual's Internet provider will host these email addresses for the user, and these are often large servers hosting many thousands of unrelated users, and will hold the email not only for the people and the participants in your case, but for many thousands of other participants, or many thousands of other people that have nothing to do with the case. This makes it, in some cases, it may be a little more difficult to get to the emails in the sense that you can't just potentially image that entire server, and that's for the courts and for you to argue. But it might be something that requires a subpoena to go and have the email extracted from those servers. One of the things you can think about, though, is if a subpoena is difficult to get or isn't something that the Internet service provider is willing to abide by, then you have to look at other places where those emails may be stored. And as I talked about, it may be on the computers used to access those emails. It may be on the iPhones, the digital devices. Actually, even nowadays, a friend of mine has a car that reads his emails to him over the car. So who knows, those emails may be stored in the car as well, too. What times do we live in here where our cars are reading our emails to us? There's also webmail. People are very familiar with webmail. Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, they all host webmail services, and these are often accessed via web browser, hence the definition, webmail. Some providers, such as Google Gmail, will allow you to get to your webmail using alternate methods, such as an email client, but in most cases, they're accessed through the web browser. Where this becomes important is that because it's accessed through the web browser, there is no local copy of the database stored on the computer that's used to access that information. So, for example, if you access your email through a web browser versus accessing your email through an email client like Outlook Express, Outlook Express will have a database of all the emails that you have accessed and a database of all the emails that you download. So you can go into Outlook Express and extract those. The web browser doesn't keep that. It doesn't keep a database, per se, of the emails that it found. Those emails are found on the servers used to serve those emails. And so you have to oftentimes look back to the server if you want to get a full database of all of those emails, and that server is hosted by a company like Google or Yahoo and can be more difficult to get at. You may be able to find fragments of the emails stored locally in the form of web pages or, as we talked about, in cache files, but in often cases with webmail, you won't find the entire email itself or the entire email database. And this gets us into subpoenas and data providers. I think this is interesting, and as I said earlier, I'm not an attorney, and so I leave this for your eyes to interpret. But AOL has a very interesting civil subpoena policy, and this is found on their website, and you see the web address there, and you can go and look it up yourself. Essentially, they will not give you information based off of a civil subpoena. The first statements they make is that they do not retain deleted items. So they say, if the person that you're looking at deletes the email, they don't still have the email. Whatever the account holder has, and that quote, AOL has, and nothing more. They do not archive account holder deleted emails. But the second part of this statement is very interesting. AOL will not return data to a third party following the issuance of a civil subpoena. They found that and this is in their quote, if a party still insists on obtaining email content from AOL, they require account holder authorization or a court order. And even then, even with a court order, they will only return the emails to the account holder themselves. So what they will do is they will return the email to the account holder, and then it's up to the account holder to provide the email to you. They will not release the email to any third party. And there is case law that occurred with AOL that said that basically a subpoena or a court order is not suffice to release their email content. So it does not supersede the privacy arrangements or agreements that they have with their account holders. So they will only return that information to the account holders. As I said, I'm not discussing the legal aspect of this. It's just something to be aware of and something that you can look up on your own. Much like emails, you have text messaging. They're often treated like short emails, and oftentimes text messages, even deleted text messages, can be retrieved from the memory of the cell phone, smartphones, PDAs, whatever it may be. As I said, I'm sitting next to my iPhone, which has 32 gigabytes of memory in it. That's a lot of memory for a lot of text messages. And using some of our tools, we can go through and retrieve these conversations. But often, it's not just the conversation that's important, but it's the act of having a conversation or the act of text messaging that's just important as the content itself. And I give two examples here. There was an example of a Metrolink train that crashed in California. And when reviewing the cell phone records and reviewing the cell phone of the engineer, they found that that engineer was actively engaged text messaging back and forth with a teenager moments before the crash happened. And if I recall, and this isn't necessarily as, you'll have to look it up, but I recall that maybe the engineer ran a signal or something like that, and there was a lot of speculation as to whether he was distracted. There was also, if you remember, the Colgan flight that crashed near Buffalo. They found that the first officer on that flight was text messaging from the cockpit of that flight while the flight was preparing for takeoff. So not necessarily saying, and I'm certainly making no opinion as to whether that attributed to the flight or not, but it was interesting, to the crash, but it was interesting that here you have somebody that was actively text messaging while the aircraft was en route or preparing to take off, and I think that brought up some questions as to whether how involved they were in the flight and what their level of professionalism was. In addition to text messages, there's lots of other information that can be stored on smartphones. My 32 gigabyte iPhone can store my voicemail history, which can be recovered from my iPhone in many cases, even after deletion. My call history, web browsing, photos and videos, application data, locally stored files. I can store files from my computer right here on my smartphone. And in addition, my iPhone has a GPS in it. It's storing information about my location at times, and that information can be, there was actually just very recently a lot of information that came out in the media about Apple and about the iPhone storing breadcrumbs, if you will, about cell towers that a person was accessing, and that information was readily able to be extracted off of the iPhone. It kind of created a pattern of where a person was geographically. The smartphones in many cases can be remote wipes by the owner, and so that makes properly storing the phone of prime importance. So if you do have a smartphone that is involved in the case and you decide, well, we want to have information extracted from that smartphone, in many cases it's very important to properly secure that phone because the owner of the phone can remote wipe those phones with a simple click from their computers. Social networking sites. You guys are going to love this. This is where I often get the oohs and ahs from the crowd. I have to admit, it depends on how often you are on social networking sites. But the prevalence of information that's readily available to anyone that wants to look from social networking sites is amazing to say the least. Examples of these include Twitter, MySpace, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And users, if you're not familiar, will often post comments and intimate details of their activities or their personal lives. This can include photographs, it can include their opinions, whatever it may be, can make its way to these social networking sites. They can also post their exact location at certain times of the day, or that it's automatically tracked for them. So there are items called geotag posts and friend lists, and these geotags is that these sites allow people to check in from their devices onto these sites, and they can show through the site exactly where they are at a certain time of the day. So I might check in Starbucks, and it uses the GPS in my phone, boop, puts it out to the internet, and you get a little pinpoint on the social networking site on a map that shows exactly where you were, and it keeps a record of all the places that this person was. In addition, as I said, you may post photos or videos of my personal lives, and these may include the images of people around me, like strangers, coworkers, friends, family members, whatever it may be. And it also may expose my friend network, other people that I involve conversations with through these social networking sites are often exposed through the site itself. So let's look at an example of an actual social networking site here. We're looking at Facebook, and this is a page that's readily available to anyone on the internet. You don't have to be a friend with this person. You don't have to ask permission to see this information. This is public information on the internet. You can see it has a picture of the user, it has their geographic information, it has their education and work history, their personal information, and a biography of them that they have written. But it gets better. You can go onto this person's site and read all the personal conversations that they're having with other users. Now, maybe the other users don't even know that their personal conversations are being published through this person's site, that he does not lock down his social networking site here. He doesn't lock down his Facebook page, so that these pages are only visible to his other friends or to the friends with which he's conversing. These pages are available to anybody that wants to look. And these conversations can include these geotags that we discussed, which is a exact location of where this user was when they created the post. So you might have a case, and to take an example, you might have a case where somebody says that they were injured on the job. But then you look at their Facebook page, which is public information if they allow it to be, and you see that they were playing basketball 3 days afterwards. And in fact, they have some pictures of them playing basketball out in the courts, and they definitely don't look like they were injured in the way that they said they were. The interesting part is, let's say they don't necessarily post the photo of them playing basketball on the courts 3 days after their injury. You can look at their friend list and see if anybody else has their information that's public, and maybe one of their friends took a picture of them playing basketball on the courts 3 days after their injury, and that is public information through Facebook. Once again, it's not necessarily something that you have to ask them permission per se to see. So there are cases, and you don't necessarily want to trick somebody into friending them to see their personal information, and you can have that be the option that you choose on Facebook, that you only want your personal information out to people that you specifically give permission to, but many people don't do that. Many people just allow that information to be publicly available through sites like Facebook and MySpace. To quickly go through some of the other information, and I'll speed up here a little bit. Word processing, everybody's familiar with word processing, especially as an attorney. You use it all the time. As we talked about, applications will often save metadata with word processing. One of the interesting aspects of word processing as well, too, is that when you create multiple versions of a file, so let's say you're editing a file and you click save, you click save, you click save, it's not overwriting the old file. What it does is it takes and saves a new version of that file and then deletes the old version of the file. So as we talked about with deletion, you can go through and ignore the table of contents, and then you can often find older versions of Word documents to see if they've been modified. And the perfect example of that would be contested wills, or maybe communications between two folks that they say one thing, but then you go and you find, look, I found an old version where this portion of it was removed and or modified. And that's what a computer forensic technician can do for you there. Images and photos. I don't think Kodak's making too much film anymore, at least not as much as they used to. And so digital images will store GPS locations, where the photo was taken. You can store information about the camera with which it was taken, so that's all stored with the photo. And so you can say, well, look, this was taken with a camera that you have that exact make and model of camera as well, so this photo may be attributable to you because you have that make and model of camera. And look, here's the GPS location exactly where that photo was taken, so you can maybe put that person at a very exact location. And then these are often shared, these photos are often shared on sites like Facebook, MySpace, or photo sharing sites like PhotoBucket and Flickr. And you can go to these photo sharing sites and then extract the metadata with those photos as well too. Financial information is obvious as well too. Often works with forensic accountants to look for financial information, Excel, QuickBooks, Quicken, and you can look for secret bank accounts, questionable transactions, and or modified information for evidence of fraud, looking for past versions of the files that you may be able to see some modification of those. And then server and usage logs. As we talked about, there's computer-generated information as well, too. And so oftentimes when emails are sent or someone logs onto a computer, that computer keeps a record of that activity on the computer. And so you can look for this automatically found information, the automatically generated information on the computer to see if the story that's being told matches the logs that are taken with the computers themselves. The important thing to remember with server and usage logs is that the information is voluminous, and so the servers will often delete older versions or roll over and overwrite old logs. So if a server log is something that you're looking to capture, you have to oftentimes issue a subpoena quickly in the process so that that information isn't rolled over and it's kept for later analysis. And then you can do a network analysis of these server logs. So, for example, if you say that someone sent an email and you want to find out where that email was sent from, you can look at the address from which the email was sent. This is what's called an IP address, and that will be logged in with the service, the server log of where that person logged on from. So you go back to the internet service provider. You say, okay, who has this IP address at such and such a date? You issue a subpoena, or the service provider then provides you with, okay, at such and such a date and time, that unique address was given to this particular user, and this is the address of that user. We all know about web pages and browser history. We all browse the internet. Internet Explorer and websites or browsers like that will often keep records of all the sites that a person used. So you can go through and extract a computer forensic technician can go through and extract this history and look at the sites that a person was viewing. Now, many browsers nowadays do include what's called private browsing option, which disables this tracking history and disables web page caching during usage, but that doesn't necessarily completely eliminate all evidence of browsing activity. As we talked about, there may be page files or remnants of some of the browsing activity that can still be found by a computer forensic technician. And then finally, black boxes and GPSs. This is something that's becoming more and more important in today's society. Black boxes aren't just for airplanes anymore. For example, if you're driving a modern car, there is most likely a black box in that car that is keeping track of information such as your accelerator usage, brake pedal usage, G-forces, maybe even GPS tracking logs of where you were. And this extends beyond your cars. Maybe machinery often nowadays has black boxes in the machinery. And I used an example in a previous time I did this course of where an elevator, and many people don't know this, elevators will have black boxes in them. And that elevator will not only store information about how the elevator is operating, but the elevator will call its manufacturer if it senses a default with itself. So let's say the elevator senses that it missed a floor 3 times or didn't stop with a level floor 3 times. The elevator itself, unbeknownst to the owner of the building, will call the manufacturer or send an email to the manufacturer that, hey, you know what, I missed the floor 3 times, I might need to be serviced. And then the manufacturer will either contact the building owner or come out and service the elevator itself because the elevator told somebody that it was broken. These are the types of information that you can go and find, this computer-generated information, that may be useful to your cases. So you have to think outside of the box of beyond just email and beyond just the obvious places to look for electronic information. We have to look at the information that's now being created in our digital society that we might not even know that's there. I bet you didn't know that, or many of you didn't know that your elevators are talking to people when you least expect them to. Matt, with that, I'll hand it over to you to see if we have any questions.
Excellent, Jeff. We do. We do have a bunch of questions here in the queue for you, and I, for one, did not know that elevators had black boxes. Do you have, this is from a question from Eric, Jeff. Do you have any recommended language to include in a subpoena to an ISP when seeking emails?
It's a great question, and we'll actually go over it a little bit later. I think the best thing that you can do in those cases is talk and enlist the help of a computer forensic technician. They will look at the specifics of your particular case and figure out, okay, what exactly are we looking for? What is it that we need so that you don't miss any information and that you provide the ISP with the right way or the exact things that you're looking for. So for example, if you say to the ISP, I need all electronic information that you hold, that's obviously going to be shot down because there's a lot of information there that's not necessarily relevant to your case. But if you can make the argument that, look, this is the information that we need and this is where it's likely to be found, it's going to be difficult for them to deny that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We have a question here from Carol who asks, to summarize, if we would want to obtain emails sent by a husband to a wife in a divorce case, but the husband was at work and he used his work computer to access his Gmail account, he sent emails through either a Gmail account or an AOL account, then we could not access his email from the work server?
No, you may access the email from the work server. Every place that email touches, there's potentially a record of the email and or the email itself. So in that particular case, I would look at, yes, is it on the work server? That email may very well be on the work server. It may be on the home server, the home computer that was used to access the email or whatever the wife received the email on. You might want to look at handheld devices, like did the wife or husband read the email, or is it automatically stored? And this happens in many cases that emails are automatically downloaded to your BlackBerry or your iPhone, and they're stored there as well too. So not only could it be potentially found on the work server, the work computer, the home computer, but there may be a half a dozen other places that it may be found. In addition to backups that the work computer may automatically make of the server and or the workstation used. So there may be backup tapes of it as well too. That's the thing about electronic information. It's so easy to duplicate. It just kind of replicates itself, and you can almost always, and I won't say almost always, in many cases you can find it in places you don't expect it.
Excellent. We have a question here from Celeste who asks, going back to the smartphone, does a remote wipe definitively remove all the data and metadata from the phone? And two, how would one securely store the phone so the owner can't remotely wipe it? Is it a matter of removing the SIM card?
That's a really good question, and I'll answer one first. It depends on the phone. So if you remote wipe the phone, does it destroy everything? It depends. It depends on how the phone remote wipes. What phones are doing nowadays is they don't actually wipe. What they do is all the information is stored encrypted in the phone. And then the encryption key that allows you to read that information is stored with the encryption. So that sounds like, okay, well, why would you store the key to a lock next to the lock? So it's like the key is taped next to the lock. But the reason that they do that is so that the remote wipe is instantaneous. Instead of having to go through and wipe the phone bit by bit, which can take some time, what they do is they destroy the encryption key. So it's like taking the key from the lock, next to the lock, and then just destroying the key. Instead of hammering away at that lock until the lock is destroyed, which can take some time, if you destroy the one and only key, you can never open up that lock. And so they just destroy the key that allows access to the encryption, so it's almost an instantaneous wipe. If that's the case, the only way to get to the data would be to bust the encryption, which isn't feasible to do nowadays. The second question was about, how do you store the phone? There's a couple different ways. Yes, it can be as simple as removing the SIM card in some cases, because then the phone doesn't know who it is and it doesn't contact the network. It can be shutting down access to the phone, or they also have what's called Faraday bags, which do not allow any electronic radiation in or out to the phone. So no signals can get to the phone, no signals can get out of the phone. So the phone is essentially on its own little island and can't talk to anybody. So it can't receive the signal to do the remote wipe if you store it in one of these cases or one of these bags that limit or eliminate any signals getting to that phone.
Okay, excellent. We have a question here from Francisco who asks, do PDFs also store metadata? And if so, do PDFs store the same amount of data as a Word document?
They do, and they can. It all depends on the program that's being used to create the PDF, but yes, there's typically metadata that's stored with almost all computer-generated documents, at least some form of metadata. It may be as simple as just a creation date or a last access date, or it can be as prevalent as the information we saw with the Word document with authors and tracking and all of those things. I do believe, and I'm not positive on this, I have to do some research, I don't know exactly what fields are stored with PDF, but they do have provisions for storing metadata like a Word document does.
Okay, excellent. We have a question here from Susan who asks, do escalators also have black boxes, so to speak, like elevators?
I don't know. This was an example that was given to me, and I actually did some research on it with like the Otis elevator. They very well may. I think anything that has a computer involved with it has the potential to store some information with that. And that information isn't necessarily stored there for the case of using it in litigation, and many times it's stored there to allow maintaining the device much simpler. So even if you have a computer-type thermostat on a building, that thermostat may be storing some information with the thermostat that is kind of a quasi-black box, used to help fix the thermostat or the heating and cooling system, but can be used as well too to get information off of it for the case of the litigation.
Okay, one more question from Renee, and then we'll move on with the final presentation of content. Does using a recovery disk to wipe a computer actually remove all the data and or stored information from the computer, phone, etc.?
Depends on how it's wiped. The security race will delete all the information, and what it does is it overwrites the actual bits on the storage device. The Department of Defense has certain regulations that they require or that they suggest for wiping devices. I think they use a 15 times wipe or 7 times. I think it's 15 times where it actually goes and overwrites each bit of information 15 times. You would know, though, if it's taking a long time, then it's probably secure wiping. So often if you secure wipe a hard drive, it can take many, many, many hours to do. Depending on the size of the hard drive, it may take a day to secure wipe the entire drive, even more than that. So it is something that's a long process, but if it is overwritten, it's almost always overwritten. It's these devices that aren't secure wipes where they're just formatted and the table of contents is destroyed, that the information can still be found. Like I said, though, it's typically not the default way that it's done. It's not something that most users would do. And then, of course, this is for you to argue the very fact that I know people have secrets, and there's nothing wrong with having secrets, and there's nothing wrong with secure wiping things. In many cases, it's the prudent thing to do, but it may be something that you can tell if the device was secure wiped, and you can make your own arguments from there as well, too.
Okay, excellent. We do have a couple more questions, but we'll hold them until the final presentation of content, until after the final presentation of content. So, Jeffrey, please proceed.
All right, I appreciate it, and I'll kind of tip through the ending here. I know we're getting close to the 3 o'clock time. Essentially, what do we do with all this ESI? So the first thing that we can do with it is it can help reduce your budget. So in many cases, it's beneficial to target the collection and the analysis of this ESI early in the case. That helps you find, not only maybe you find the smoking gun before you have to expend other funds into your case, but it can also show you where the dead ends are or where the promising areas for exploration are. So if you look for this electronic information, because it's so prevalent, because it's so voluminous, you can help target your case and essentially make your cases much more efficient as far as time is concerned and much more effective as far as cost is concerned as well, too. You can also use the information that you find to, it may conflict with what you're being told by the opposing party. And so that may show concealment or it may show areas that you want to dive deeper into with your potential cases. The other reason to target this information is that you don't have the expense of surprises. Nobody wants to find out at the end of the case about information that they had no idea that it existed. So because more of our lives are being captured every day, and your life, my life, is being captured electronically, there's more out there to be found. You don't want your opposition to know about it before you do. So that means finding the information not only that you need for your case, but all of the information that may reveal areas of your case that may be weaker than other areas or areas that need to be adjusted, that need to be looked at more deeply so that you can figure out exactly what is going on with your case. Remember, and we talked about this up front, even though you might not be looking for the electronic information, I almost bet you your opposition is. So you have to know what's out there, and it's definitely good to elicit the help of a strong forensic technician in this area as well, too. So how do we look for the electronic information? What's the best way to do this? Well, the first thing that we want to do is we want to define what are our goals for this, the eDiscovery project. What are our goals for the computer forensics investigation? By defining these goals, we can find ourselves or eliminate ourselves from wandering down meandering paths and just focusing on, okay, will this information help me achieve this goal or will it not? And then we can be very informed on what the direction we want to take is and eliminate any overages or additional costs that we may have. Remember that litigation is defined by evidence and inference. And so you have point A and point B, which are inferences, and it's the evidence that connects those inferences. Because of the volume of information that can be found electronically, it can provide many, many points between those 2 points of inferences, which help create a stronger bond between the inference and help create a stronger case on your end. So how do we prepare? Well, the first thing that you want to do is you want to define the parties of interest that may have been exposed to this information. Like I said with the email case, and we'll use the husband and wife, there was an email sent from a husband to a wife. Well, who was exposed to that? Well, maybe the company was exposed to that, his work was exposed to that, all those servers, all the intermediate servers were exposed to that, his computer, her computer, their phones, whatever it may be. And then maybe she forwarded that email. Can you believe what he said to me? And she forwarded it to her 5 best friends. Guess what? The 5 best friends are now exposed to that, and they may have that information as well still on their computers. And then what are we looking for? Are we looking for financial information, videos, whatever it may be? We have to define what is our goal, where may it be, and what is it that we're looking for. And what's the time frame in which that information may have existed. So by narrowing all those different things, we can create a more pinpoint effort to look for the information that we need here. And then survey the field. Where would that be contained? Is it in an office email? Is it on a BlackBerry, an iPhone? Is it at home or a third party? And what's the current condition of those devices that were used to access that information? Do they still exist? Are they still in use? Are they damaged? Were they sold? By looking for the devices, we can help find where that information may be. We can target those specific devices to find what you're looking for, but not be too expensive when we do it. And then finally, game plan. Based on the systems in place, where may the information be, what are the most cost-effective systems to find it on, and if we can't find it on the original systems, are there any duplication of the evidence between third-party systems, say backups, through the cloud storage, on PDAs, on smartphones? It's very easy to duplicate, so that means it can be easier to find. And then finally, use the assistance of a computer forensic representative in crafting your discovery request. We can help you do things such that you're not just requesting, say, it may seem to you that it would be reasonable to say, give me all the hard drives in use by the defendant, but you may miss CDs or DVDs or PDAs or tapes, cell phones, whatever they may be. Your job is to litigate. Your job is to help your client in whatever legal needs that they have. Our job is to know the technical aspects of that, and nobody expects you to. So that's where we assist you with that process. We use our information and our background to help you find the information that you need for those cases. So I have to have the 5 key steps, 5 easy steps at the end of the process. Talk to your client about any and all electronic devices with which they use and or interact. Any of those devices may contain information that is relevant to the case. And then think outside the box. Like we talked about black boxes. The escalator example is a perfect example. There's electronic information stored in many places beyond where you would expect it to be. Almost everything nowadays has a computer, and that computer may store information. Once you know where those devices are, secure the devices. With the example of the phone, it can be remotely wiped. You want to properly secure that device so there's no spoilation of the information. And then identify the areas for discovery, such as if you're looking at computer logs, you have to issue subpoenas early in the process so that those logs aren't deleted by the ISP or they aren't rolled over. And obtain the help. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you in any way that we can. We want to see you find the information that's relevant to the case and find the information that you need to better serve your clients. So that's the end of what I have for now. I know that Matt had a couple other questions he had. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure having you all online with us. I hope it's been beneficial for you to spend this hour with us. And if there are any additional questions or you need anything from me or from Matt, you can always reach me through TASA, or my information was there at the beginning of the presentation as well, too. My thanks go out to TASA and to Matt, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. What a great presentation. We do have a couple questions I'd like to get to the next couple minutes, and then we'll wrap things up. Carol asks, what do you recommend as the best way to protect Word documents when being transmitted so as to preclude the receiver from obtaining metadata?
A metadata scrubber is a great way to do it, and to make sure that you're maintaining versioning of the documents, I think, is very important as well. So for example, let's say you have two cases that are similar, and you take and you create a document for the first case. You come up with a second case that's similar to that, and so you want to save time, and so you modify the original Word document to use with the second case. You should probably scrub the document between the two cases and then maintain separate versions of those Word documents so that you're not inadvertently passing on metadata from the first case to the second case. So using data scrubbers, making sure that when you forward documents, often documents will be forwarded back and forth between attorneys or folks in the firm, making sure that the wrong version doesn't get sent out. So, for example, you take a Word document and you scrub a version and then store it on your computer, but then you write a second version that hasn't been scrubbed and forward that to, say, a paralegal for going over the document, and then that's the version that ultimately gets sent out. You may inadvertently be sending out a version of that document that hasn't been scrubbed. So maybe adding something to the file name or adding a code internally or something at the bottom of the page that can show, yes, this document has been scrubbed, and then doing it multiple times. It doesn't hurt to do it multiple times in the process. You're just eliminating that information and better serving your clients as well, sir.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. We have a question here from Monica who asks, is there any way to encrypt data from a PDF file in order to email it to a client?
Yeah, absolutely. Emails will have encryption internally if you're using an email system that can encrypt. And then there is encryption on PDFs as well too, or you can store it in and encrypt it like a zip file, although zip file encryption is, depending on the encryption you're using, isn't necessarily very powerful. But you can look at Acrobat and Adobe products, and you can get encryption keys through them. I would look more at adobe.com and look at the processes that they have. But yes, absolutely, there are both third-party and first-party encryption techniques for PDFs or any file for that matter.
Okay, great. We have two more questions. Francisco asks, we use an Exchange server, a 2003 Exchange server. When a user deletes a message from Outlook, the server holds it for 7 more days, and after 7 days, pass, the server deletes it. Can forensic software recover these deleted messages somehow?
It is possible, and it depends on the configuration that's being used by the server itself. And this actually brings up an interesting point, too, which is about deletion policies. This is kind of an offshoot of computer forensics and spoliation of data. If you have a specific deletion, or better known as data retention policy in place, and you follow that policy, if it comes up down the road that some of that information may be required for litigation, you can then say, and like I said, I'm not an attorney, but this is for you to discuss. You can then say, well, look, we were following our data retention policy. That information has been scrubbed. We had no idea that litigation was coming. That information has been since deleted, and I cannot provide it to you because we follow that policy, and we religiously follow that policy. If you have a policy in place and you don't necessarily follow it, and let's say you have, a 6-month retention policy, and you've kept everything for 6 months, but the one piece of information that may be involved in litigation has been deleted, and that may come into play with your case. That might be something that would be brought up during the case itself, and you say, well, look, you have this data retention policy, but you're obviously not following it. Why did you delete this one particular file? It's something that you can argue in court, and I think it's something that may be of relevance. And then there's obviously those folks that don't have any data retention policies. I think data retention policies are very important, not just for litigation standpoints and evidence standpoints, but also for the standpoint of we don't necessarily want old versions of information just languishing around on our computers, because if we we talked about, if we get rid of that computer or that computer is then disposed of, you don't want this information from 3 years ago that is confidential to potentially get out. So data retention policies for corporations, for individuals, and for attorneys alike are something that's very important to look into. And it sounds like in this Exchange server case that you have this data retention policy of a deleted item held for 7 days. It depends on how it's deleted. It may be secure deleted. It may not be secure deleted after the case. It would be something that you would have to look at in that particular case, but you may be able to find that email.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. We have one final question here from Ned, who asks, when a WordPerfect document is saved by clicking Save Without Metadata, is it actually scrubbed?
I believe it is. You'll have to look at WordPerfect itself, but yes, I believe that is the reason that it has that, and it's exactly what we talked about. So I would go in the help documents of support there for the WordPerfect program, but that is the typical intention when you see something like that. Doesn't mean that an additional scrubbing wouldn't hurt. We should never be too clean. But yes, obviously as these types of situations come up, and WordPerfect is something that's used with attorneys often, maybe in many cases more so than Word, or at least it used to be, they put this feature in there specifically for this reason.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Thank you for the time that you put into this presentation. I think everybody who is in attendance has taken a lot of information from it, and it's quite evident that you know the subject very well. So thank you for the time and the effort that you put into this presentation for all those who attended. On behalf of the TASA Group, I would like to thank everyone who attended for taking time out of their very busy schedules to join us this afternoon. If you'd like to speak to Jeffrey about a case or a project, you can contact us here at TASA. Our telephone number is 800-523-2319. We'll be sending out the link to the archived recording of this webinar tomorrow morning. The archived recording of this webinar, as well as all of our previous webinars, are posted in the TASA Knowledge Center, which can be found on the TASA website, tasanet.com. And in the top-level navigation, click on Knowledge Center. You'll be able to find all our webinars right there. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, please email me at mhyde@tasanet.com. You will be receiving a follow-up email at 3:30 p.m. thanking you for attending today's program and giving you all my contact information so that if you want to get in touch with Jeffrey, we can facilitate that quickly and easily. I do look forward to seeing everybody at future TASA events. And on behalf of everybody here at TASA, I would like to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Thank you, Jeffrey, and I'm now going to end this afternoon's webinar.